Good. So yeah, this film is it's a quest. It's called In Search of the Divine, but it's trying to tie together paranormal phenomena, possibly UFOs, consciousness, and God. And that's probably not possible. That's probably futile, like all quests. But
It's fun.
yeah. So I just want to chat to a few people on the way to see they can, shed any enlightenment on, and speaking to yourself with your faith and your knowledge. I mean, what does the divine mean to you?
It's an interesting one. So, I think there are always two approaches that people tend to have.
Mm.
One is the kind of the believers, but not religious group.
Mm.
And so they have a vague sense of the divine. I don't really know why, to be honest.
Mm.
I guess I mean, for me, I believe in God, so I believe all of us have a capacity to understand, to have an awareness of God. I just think it's inherent in all reality. So I think everybody has that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, obviously, I branch over into a religious expression of that. So
Mm.
that, I guess, takes a lot of forms. I mentioned the Keith Ward book, and so he has quite a reasonable model. I mean, so for him, the divine, he sees the divine as a kind of mind. Now, it's not the same as the mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the conscious mind that we're talking about.
Mm.
So when we think about God, we often talk about God as an analogy.
Mm.
So you have a
Mm.
process of thinking,
Mm.
a strategy of thinking, a level of thinking, and then that's analogous to God.
Mm.
And in exactly the same way that in the Bible,
Mm.
God is seen, particularly in the Old Testament,
Mm.
as a kind of a man,
Mm.
a guy with a beard that wanders around.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think anybody really believes that was what God's like,
Mm.
but you're using certain strategies to help comprehend God.
Yeah. 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 Okay.
So I think in that same mindset, I mean, God is obviously beyond comprehension. That's how you define God, in
Mm-hmm.
effect.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you could, famously, if you could explain God, it wouldn't be God. It'd be just something you've explained,
Yeah.
and that's really important. So the divine is always going to be somewhat intangible.
Yeah.
So for me, but I like the Keith Ward model of it being kind of like a mind,
Like,
underpins all reality.
is that a collective mind then that we all share?
No, I mean, well, so this is an interesting point. So in theology, there are a number of approaches.
Mm.
One is what you call classical theism, which is what I am,
Mm.
which is God and the world, the universe, whatever, are separate things.
Mm.
God is the creator. God is, in
Yeah.
Jeremiah, God is the potter.
Mm.
Creation is the pot. So they're separate. So in that context, no, you wouldn't have a conscious mind being the same as God. That they are separate things.
Mm.
You then get another one that's called pan. I don't know if you come across panentheism.
No.
So panentheism. So the opposite one is pantheism, right? So
Mm.
pantheism is that
Oh yeah,
God is
yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. That one. Yeah.
So therefore, that would fit with that God is, your consciousness is an expression of God, and vice versa. So reality and God and the consciousness are all bound up in one thing. So
Mm.
that's pantheism,
Fantastic.
which fits with kind of nature religions and paganism, that kind of thing. And then there's a middle one that's called panentheism,
Right.
which is that reality or the conscious mind or whatever it is an aspect of God.
Right. Okay.
So pantheism is God and reality are the same; they're synonymous. Panentheism is there's a bit of an overlap, like a Venn diagram or whatever. That there's a bit of reality that's in God, and there are some Christian panentheists. I can't buy that, because in effect the idea would be if you went out and snapped a twig on a tree, you
Yeah.
were in effect snapping a bit of God. Uh,
Right.
you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
doesn't work for me, and it's not standard theology. So for me, the answer would be no.
Yeah.
Uh, there's consciousness, and there may well be collective consciousness and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely fine, but that's not the same as God. There has to be for me. There has to be a separation.
Okay. So we all our individual consciousness that is
Yeah.
that is that is divine. Is that what you're saying? That,
No, no, I'm not. I'm saying the opposite. So our
okay.
individual, any kind of consciousness is consciousness,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's yeah.
and God is different.
God as a mind.
Yeah, so it's not a conscious mind. Well, it's a kind of a conscious mind, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Depending how you understand consciousness, and we can talk about this in a minute, if it's a material kind of expression, it can't be the same as God.
No.
And then there are lots of ways we can access the divine. Consciousness would be one, but also physicality, senses, dreams. I don't know whatever. There are lots of different ways we can approach the divine that aren't necessarily about consciousness. So consciousness is a facet of that, but I don't think it's the whole thing.
Okay, that's fascinating. Okay. Okay, so I guess that's where the power of prayer and things like that come into communicating with the divine, would you say? Interacting?
Absolutely. So I mean, so for me, the divine I understand as a metaphysical concept, and I don't know how much you understand with metaphysics. So metaphysics is really the study of the ultimate reality.
Yeah.
And within that ultimate reality are things such as a material world, right? But that's not the full nature of reality. That's a facet of reality. So the idea is that somehow we can access different elements of reality. And so by understanding the divine, we might use different elements to access this, to go beyond our material makeup. Now, that isn't as odd as it sounds, actually. I was thinking about this the other day. So if you take the play Hamlet, for instance, Hamlet tells us something about reality, but it's not a physical thing. I mean, you've got a book and you've got black marks on a page, but that's not Hamlet. Hamlet is something that seems to exist in a slightly different form. And you can't reduce that form, in my view, to material stuff. So quite normally in human life, actually, all the time, we're engaging with some kind of metaphysical approach, whether it be beliefs. I believe the sun's going to stay shining, so I'll mow the lawn. That's not a scientific belief. That's not a scientific material view. So we're all, narrative stories, music, whatever, all the time. We're metaphysically engaging with deep aspects of reality. So prayer is just another expression of that. So it's not actually as strange as it seems at first, I think.
Okay. And how does science fit into all this? Because I have a science degree.
Yeah.
Science, as far as I'm concerned, is about reductionism. It's about
absolutely,
material. And I think that can explain, the reality of life. I don't think it can, and that's my
no, I don't think it can at all.
I'm making this film, really.
Yeah. So I mean, science is a way of reading reality. It's a perception. It's about understanding an element, the material bits of reality, and that's amazing. I mean, that's life changing. You think of treatment for cancer or whatever. I mean, that can save somebody's life, so they live longer.
Yeah.
But that it can't possibly in any way be the basis of all things. Like I said to you before with Hamlet, you couldn't reduce Hamlet to science. No. If you did, you would lose the whole point. in effect, I mean, if you said, "Oh, Hamlet's just a load of lovely black marks on a page," I mean, what are you saying? You're missing you're not really saying anything about Hamlet.
Yeah, it's a good point, because science is getting more and more strange. In fact, with quantum physics, I read somewhere recently that consciousness, not talking about the divine here, but consciousness, is actually, or could actually, one of the theories is that it could be controlled by quantum particles, which leads to out of body things and experiences. I don't know if that's true or not.
I mean, the simple answer is no, it's not. Not for any other reason other than nobody knows.
No, yeah.
And that's the bottom line. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot. So I did part of my master's, I did philosophy of mind.
Yeah.
And so I looked at a lot of the issues around consciousness and things. I mean, the reality is we're nowhere near solving the issue of consciousness, right? I mean, as you probably know, there are three basic models, of which there are many, many, many views, all of which are very live, all of which are being debated massively by very significant philosophers and neurophysicists, all of which are falling out and arguing about it all the time. I mean, the three basic models are, what is this weird floaty thing called consciousness? And how does it connect with a thing that's very clearly physical, a brain? I mean, you can weigh a brain. Apparently in my youth, I even ate a brain. Up to my mum. Cheap brains on toast, but that's a slight random digression. So you've got the material model, and there are lots of facets to that. One of which is to say that consciousness is either is a myth, consciousness doesn't really exist,
Yeah.
or it's a pointless appendage, or whatever. But the quantum model would fit with that, I think, in some respects. The other model, the opposite one, is what I talked to you before, panpsychism. So material model is everything is material, all reality is material in some form,
Yeah.
and then there are these things that don't quite fit. Consciousness and i.e. the paranormal don't quite fit with that model. So either you dismiss them and say they're a nonsense, or you tweak the model. But either way, that's how it works. The opposite of that is panpsychism, which is that everything is conscious, which would fit a little bit to the God mind concept. So I mean, you've got to solve the problem. How does the conscious physical, how do the two relate? Either there's no consciousness, everything's physical, or there's not really any physical, it's all conscious. And then the other model is kind of quite interesting. And the one I'm probably lean to is what we call, dualism, which obviously comes from Descartes. The mind and body are separate things altogether, which is kind of where I sit, I think. And again, that's a very live debate. And there are a lot of philosophers who think you simply can't solve this question, which I'm quite comfortable with. So yeah, I mean, and so the thing with quantum physics, I mean, yeah, there's no, as it stands, there's no evidence about, so there are ideas behind it, but as I see that there's no real drive. I mean, the issue with quantum physics, of course, is it relates to very small things. So arguably, it has absolutely no impact whatsoever on human life. The only area it might do is certainly within areas of consciousness, but it's very much, it's very much open to debate and nowhere near any kind of resolution. So I tend to sit, I guess, and from my sort of spiritual perspective, with the dualist view that actually they're just different models. Like, we can't unify general relativity and quantum physics. We can't put the two. Well, both things are valid, but they're completely, as it stands, completely incompatible with one another. And obviously, go on, sorry.
But that's the human thing. We want to create this one model that explains everything, I guess.
Yeah. And we can't. And this is very much the drive of the 20th century. Actually, the optimism of the turn of the 20th century was very much, post-enlightenment, that we can fix all this stuff. And obviously Einstein comes along and just blows it out the water. Then quantum physics comes along, blows it up. And actually, we seem to be getting further than we ever were to a unified kind of understanding. We're getting deeper and deeper, and that's great, and we're learning. But in my view, CERN, breaking up little particles hasn't brought us any closer to any real understanding. And I personally don't think it will, because you're dealing with the material realm. There's only going to be, whatever, just smaller particles. What more universes? I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of difference to me, to be honest.
Well, I don't know. Maybe because CERN is about to find possible other universes alongside our own.
Yeah.
So that's, for me, studying the paranormal and UFOs. That opens up possibilities of this phenomena being, interaction between different universes, different dimensions, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and wormhole thing and all that. I mean, I think that's it's very plausible in my view. And time travel. Certainly time travel is theoretically possible.
Sure.
I don't know the ins and outs of the complexity, the metaphysical complexities of it, but it's not inconceivable that we'd have time travel in a few hundred years. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, also, I know we talked about UFOs recently.
Yeah.
But what I'm coming to the realization now is these are not necessarily flesh and blood or physical craft that we're seeing. These could be, I don't know, spiritual or some sort of energy, possibly. I've spoken to a fair few, what should I say, evangelical Christians in America who, adamant, and I've had this conversation, that they see them as some sort of malevolent, demonic force, which I don't, doesn't sit well with me. But this just seems to be, if you take into the abduction experiences that a lot of people say they've had, that does tie up with that a little bit. But then again, is this a spiritual battle going on, do you think, or is that just a bit far-fetched?
It's really difficult. I mean, I personally, I wouldn't see UFOs as demonic in that sense. I mean, the issue is, and what you're going to find with evangelical Christians is, the Bible doesn't really have the paranormal
No.
in effect. I mean, there's a couple of ghosts in there, and then the fabulous story of Samuel, which I love. And Jesus, of course, is described as a ghost by the disciples. So obviously they're aware of this stuff. It's not to say there isn't paranormal, but their cosmology and their theology is all bound up in this idea of demons and demonic entities. So and that's how it all works. And that goes right into the New Testament. That's the system is based on this idea of demonic presences everywhere. And that accounts for all kinds of things that we might nowadays call mental illness or whatever. So they're always so any kind of anomalous phenomena. It's certainly in one capacity. If you're going to read it from a biblical perspective, you're always going to put it into a demonic kind of category because that's the mindset of how the Bible works. That's the cosmology of Christian Judaism and Islam.
And if you take it literally, I guess that's, like you say, that's where you're going to come to that conclusion, I guess.
Because you can't have another conclusion in effect, because that's your understanding of reality. So that you can't have a biblical reality as such if that's your mindset, and then use a different kind of religious cosmology. That wouldn't work. I mean, from my view, I mean, I don't buy that. I mean, I'm totally okay with that, and I believe in demonic presences and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not convinced by the UFO thing in a sort of demonic sense. I mean, what can I ask you then? So, why what makes you think that the UFOs are sort of spiritual?
Well, maybe not spiritual, but definitely not physical. I think there's something else to them. I think John Keel. I've read a lot of John Keel recently.
I don't know him. Right.
He was in the 60s. He was one of the first 50s, 60s, 70s. One of the first kind of US. He was a proper journalist, then started studying UFOs and went around just cataloging all the reports. And he noticed the similarities with these sightings and then kind of paranormal events in the past, like fairies and goblins and incubi, succubi, things like that.
Oh, that's interesting.
And they're all kind of basically what we see in the skies now, and the people who get abducted is how we interpret this phenomena culturally, really. And that's what he's saying. Whereas in the past, it might have been say experiences with fairies or something like that, going on to forbidden land and things like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, and this kind of opens up a different thing. And even the recent whistleblowers, I think David Grush has alluded to this a little bit, and I know Tom DeLonge from Blink 182 is also, is a big ufologist himself. He's leaning this way as well, and it kind of makes sense to me that there's something more going on than just why would spaceships travel, light years and then crash, and then it just makes no sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's I mean, I find that fascinating because you're absolutely right. I mean, depending on how you see things, I mean, the idea is the UFOs are around all the time, and it seems to be, you look at the appearances, I mean, it's constant. Yet there seems to be no kind of point, as it were, as such. Well, I'm not saying no point, but I mean, there doesn't seem to be much that comes out of these.
Oh no.
These things, so maybe there is a slightly different interpretation to. I mean, I'm very open to this, and I think certainly with the paranormal, I think we really need to be open-minded about how we interpret things. I think.
So regarding paranormal, how do you see paranormal phenomena?
So I mean, it's interesting. So I mean, I think one of the things, and I mentioned to you, is kind of the taxonomy of the paranormal. How do you break things up? I mean, what we're talking about is something that's very, very vague. And from what I gather, very little conclusive scientific evidence, not in favor, but in terms of way of unpacking this stuff. And I don't think that's a problem personally. I think that's absolutely fine that there are things beyond science because of my life is fundamentally supernatural. So I'm okay with that. But I guess so. For instance, I was mentioning to you the really good book about deliverance ministry by Jason Bray just came out last year, I think. And so he breaks down some of the paranormal things that he does. I mean, he's an exorcist for sort of 20 odd years, and so he breaks them down into poltergeists, place hauntings. So poltergeists we know what,
Yeah.
Place hauntings are kind of, your cavalier wanders through the wall with a sword or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
and goes back out again.
Yeah.
What he calls actual hauntings, where
Mm.
there's some kind of interaction
Yeah.
with the human, and then sort of demonic possessions. Well, from a sort of theological perspective, I mean, there's very little theology on this. Let's be
Oh, no.
honest.
Yeah.
I was surprised, and when I read his book, I was surprised that actually a lot of it he was kind of working out through his experience.
Yeah.
Because there's very little back in it. Okay, we've got loads on demons and demonology, right? So we can kind of park that to some extent. Poltergeist, certainly his view is there's, in effect, it's telekinesis
Mm.
based around stress
Sure.
uh, and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
so for him, you can park that as well in a way. It's a physical phenomena that we just don't understand.
That the mind is somehow creating.
Somehow, I mean, the interesting thing with paranormal poltergeists are related to I mean, what I was thinking about the paranormal is that actually it relates to sentient beings, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
I mean, whether animals or humans.
Mm.
I mean, do you get the paranormal on Venus? I don't know. I mean, obviously we don't know, but it does seem to be, massively linked with, you know, you don't. Hold on, my daughter. Hi, darling. I'm just doing a chat. You all right, my love? Do you want to say hello to Mark? Sorry, my daughter's just got back. Where was I? So yeah, I mean, you don't get ghost rocks, for instance. So there's certainly something bound up in animals and people that's significant there about the paranormal, I think. And so I don't know where I've gone with this. So I think there is clearly a human. So with poltergeists, for instance, that they're related to people, as we know. I mean, maybe they do move without anyone seeing stuff, but that they seem to be that kind of link.
Yeah.
And then you get the other stuff. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, place hauntings are, I think, probably lean, I would say, to the more physical side. I don't quite get how that works, but maybe there's something, memories that linger in buildings.
Yeah.
I mean, paranormal. Interestingly, I was thinking is very sensory. It's not about the mind as such. It's about smells. It's about things you see, things you hear. There is a clear relationship with the kind of the biological, physical sentientness of people, and I don't know quite what that tells us. It's a form of seeing and understanding rather than something that's just present. But I mean, I don't know about the place hauntings. Actual hauntings, I mean, that's where the demon stuff's kind of okay. I can cope with that in a way. The actual hauntings, I think, are a real struggle. I mean, what's going on there? Where a paranormal thing actually interacts with people. I mean, I guess there's a sense where if we think reality is a lot bigger than the material world, and this is what I'm trying to say to you, I think, a little bit, that I don't think really the paranormal fitting into a physical concept or a material is really getting us anywhere. I think poltergeists can quite neatly fit into that. I'm not sure the other stuff. I think that there are other perceptions of reality.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
And I think that's what's going on there. I mean, interestingly, in the Bible, excuse me. I mean, you get a sense. I've been reading the letter to the Ephesians recently, which is just fantastic. Written about 80 AD, and so the model there. I'm going to say Paul probably didn't write it. Is that there are layers of kind of what he calls heavens. So you've got the earth heaven, or the earth, sorry, and then there are these different layers, and I can't remember how many there are. But Paul seems to, in a dream, visits the third heaven. There's a seventh heaven. And then there's heaven, i.e., where God lives with all the angels. And each of these heavens seems to be ruled in some form by some kind of entity. They're not necessarily bad. Some of them might be demonic. I'm not talking now how I see things. I'm talking about how Paul was. But there is this idea of these layers, and people seem to move between the layers. And there is a sense, I think, and I say I'm not an expert on Paul, but there is a bit of a sense that people can get stuck at these heavens, and there are authorities that kind of control them, and then you kind of move on.
That ties in with hauntings, I think.
It does a little bit, where people are kind of stuck in some kind of process until they can kind of. I mean, people talk about this, like, they need to be free to move on. I mean, from a deliverance perspective, You know, I mean, the idea is I think we don't really know, but we do what works.
Yeah.
You know, and so certainly in Ephesians, the power of Ephesians is the amazing line: no principalities or powers or authorities or leaders or whatever can separate us from the love of Christ. Now, by principalities and power, we're talking about these kind of demonic beings. We're not talking politics. So the idea is that Jesus is salvation sort of story is so definitive and universal that it covers everything. It covers earth and all the other heavens. It's complete. So
Wow.
so from a deliverance perspective, you know, you can go into kind of any situation with kind of the power of Jesus and know that you're okay because it covers all bases. So, and I think reading the book by Jason Bray, you know, that's kind of how it works. So in a way, he doesn't really know what's going on, but it works. The other interesting thing that he raises in his book that I really liked is the way that things can be intermingled. So you've got this kind of 4-group taxonomy, but actually that they're not necessarily separate. So one thing I found fascinating was his view that actually very often you get poltergeist activity with the others.
All right. Well,
But this can kind of confuse paranormal stuff.
yeah.
So very often people think, oh my word, this is a terrible haunting. When actually it might be a place haunting with a poltergeist.
Yeah.
And the idea there being, of course, quite naturally that actually the fear and the shock of having a haunting instigates a kind of a poltergeist thing. So actually, so in his deliverance ministry, you know, the poltergeist stuff is about calming people and healing them, bringing them to a place of calm and safety and love and all that kind of stuff that seems to work on the poltergeist bits.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is. It was a really interesting. I mean, say it only came out last year, but it really got me thinking actually because it's so unusual. We can't kind of hold anything back from how we're, you know, we're very. It's I mean, this is why this is fun today because you've got an open plane in effect to explore stuff, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's kind of